Welcome to the Town of Kirkland Lake Council meeting of December the 18th. One notice. Council will hold a special public meeting on Tuesday, January the 15th, 2019 to consider rezoning application for Kirkland Lake Gold to rezone lands from rural RU to mineral extraction and disposal MED. We will have a moment of silence. Approval of the agenda.
I have a motion that is moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. The Council approves the agenda for its regular meeting of December 18th, 2018 as presented.
All in favor? Unanimous. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? None declared. Petitions and delegations? None noted. Acceptance of minutes?
It's moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. The Council accepts the minutes of the following meetings. The special meeting of Council held December 11th, 2018, and the regular meeting of Council held December 11th, 2018.
All in favor? Unanimous. Reports of municipal officers and communications. Councillor Rick Owen, without the S.
Thanks, Your Worship. It's nice to have the right name. Last council meeting, I brought up the fact that it was part of the Ford election platform to share the resource taxes and revenue that they take out of Northern Ontario with Northern Ontario municipalities. I know Kirkland Lake has been in the lead, fighting for its share of the mining tax, which currently 100% goes to the province. As well, a number of other municipalities have been fighting the same fight, as well as fighting for a share of their stumpage fees for the forestry industry and a share of the aggregate fees, which currently my understanding is they don't get, because the Aggregate Act does not come all the way into Northern Ontario. In Southern Ontario, it's my belief that they do get their share of the aggregate tax. Normally, I would say give a new government some time to get in there and get comfortable, but as we have seen with the Ford government on a number of other issues, they are moving quickly on a lot of their election platforms. It's been my experience, having been in the news business for a number of years, that in the past, often Northern Ontario platforms just got shuffled to the side and we didn't get what was promised us. So that's why I brought up the resolution. I'm hoping the council will support this resolution and then that we will distribute it to the other Northern Ontario communities as well as to the appropriate ministers in the Ford government.
Thank you. Any further comments from council? Tracy? Stacy? 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 You did good with all
So close.
I'll do better. Sorry, Stacy.
Sorry to Rick. So I couldn't find much information online regarding this platform promise. I did find a lot of partnerships with Indigenous and First Nations. Do you know anything more about how this funding works? Like, is it going to take away from any funding we already get? Kind of, you know, give from one hand, take from another? Do you know anything about the process?
Now I'm confused. To Councillor White. Okay, initially, apparently, the Wynne government came up with a platform to share the mineral tax with Indigenous people, and she was going to give them 50%. The Liberal platform didn't include municipalities. The Ford Northern platform changed the Indigenous communities to municipalities or just straight communities. As per, are they going to take from one hand to give to another? I don't want to be a cynic, but there is that possibility. But to sit here and do nothing and miss an opportunity to increase, possibly increase, what we're going to get from the province, I think would be a mistake. But I can't honestly say. And, you know, I'd have to be in the Conservative caucus to know for sure.
Councillor Ivanov?
That would be my concern, is that transfer payments get reduced, and then we end up with some resource payments, and we end up going absolutely nowhere. That would be the concern I would have with going after resource funding. I don't see the province giving us something without taking away from somewhere else.
Well, under the Aggregate Act, which is a bit different from, obviously, from the Mining Act, but I think the way they were proposing that was to so much per tonnage, and we're talking 5-6 cents. It doesn't sound like a lot, but to the mining industry, I don't think it's a large amount, although they produced hundreds of thousands of tons of ore. It might be a small amount, but anything coming back to the community would certainly help. I think, just to clarify, Wilf, from the mines themselves, we only get the taxation from the buildings on the properties themselves, and they're classified at a
Yes, that's
lower
correct.
rate.
It varies from municipality to municipality. Here we do have a tiered system, and we only get what's on the surface.
Okay, thank you. Are we passing that resolution? Okay.
So the resolution is moved by Councillor Rick Owen, and it's seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier. Whereas the bulk of Ontario's natural resources that are harvested, mined, and or extracted are in Northern Ontario, and these industries are essential to the economic growth of Northern Ontario. And whereas Northern Ontario municipalities provide services to these industries and their employees, and whereas taxes, whereas taxes and revenue streams from the natural resources industries go to the province of Ontario. I'm sorry, I've got a tickle, I've got to, can you finish that for me? I'm sorry.
Okay. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Kirkland Lake asks the Premier of Ontario to enact its Northern Ontario Natural Resource Revenue Sharing Program to support economic growth and sustainability of Northern Ontario municipalities, and that this resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, Honourable Doug Ford, Minister of Finance, Honourable Vic Videlli, Minister of Energy, Northern Development and Mines, Honourable Greg Rickford, Minister of Municipal Affairs, Honourable Steve Clark, AMO, FNUM, Neoma, TMAC, and all Northern Ontario municipalities.
Just one comment, Joanne, if you can.
Sorry.
You okay?
Sorry.
We have TMAG, but does TMA, Temiskaming Municipal Association, automatically get that when it goes to TMAG?
Yes, it does.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? 6 to 1. Okay. Reports of municipal officers and communications, continued. I will speak on councillor remuneration. That was easy for me to say. The report to council is on hand. I'm not going to go through the whole report. In general, my comments were, council has inherited a corporation that has gone through a lot of change in the last 2 years and needs to prepare itself for the future. You can participate that this will require, anticipate, sorry, that this will require adjustment in our finances. We will need to exercise restraint while we determine what our priorities are and what our resources are. I'm asking council today to set the example by taking a wage freeze for the first year in office while we determine our priority spending. I believe we should do a strategic review of the corporation. I also believe we need to define what our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are, and how they align with the public expectations as well as our resources. Therefore, if you agree, I am asking council to issue direction to the CAO to begin this process and provide a scope of work for the next council meeting. I now open for discussion with my fellow councillors. Any thoughts? Councillor Ivanov.
No, I agree with you, Your Worship. I think we should take a wage freeze for the first year and just see how things are working out with our total budget, not just with our wages. And it's a good example to set for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
I'm also in full support of a freeze. I didn't get elected to run for money. It was certainly trying to make a difference, and that's what I'm willing to do, so I'm in full support.
Councillor Stacy White.
Yeah, because we're yet to understand the full scope of our duties and position, nor the time required of us to fill our duties as councillor. There's really no need to increase our remuneration at this time. Perhaps after the first year, we may feel an investigation into our remuneration is warranted, but at this time, I'm happy to vote against the increase.
I agree. I think when we're doing the review of other municipalities, we'll get a better idea as to how they're compensated as well. From what I've seen so far, I think we're about middle of the road. We're certainly not the highest. We didn't get into this position to get rich quick, but I know the demands of council are a lot more than what you would think. I look at the last 2 years on council, and last year I attended 136 meetings, functions, including council meetings and committee meetings. So, and this year it's up to about 147, and the year is not over. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying there is a big demand of your time, and I think by freezing the wages for council at this time, it sets the right tone. As I said, we're not trying to get rich, but to attract competent people to put their names up for election and do a good job. So hopefully that's we will fulfill that those demands. Is that coming back to a? Or
That's a bylaw,
A
but we will do some amendments to it now. So what I can do is just that council consider the remuneration freezing the wages for the members of council to the 2018 level. But there's also the option number 2 that's in the report that staff was hoping that council would discuss. And this has to do with the health benefits for any member of council who serves 3 terms or more, once they hit 55, they can apply to the town and get on the town's health benefits for that 10 years. And is that something that this council would like to carry forward?
Yeah, that was actually, thanks, Joanne, that was passed in 2009, so several councilors back. It's not going to affect us today, or the councilors that are, I think there's 2 or 3 that still get those benefits. They would be grandfathered in, that's my understanding. So it's from this day going forward, if that is passed today, to eliminate that benefit. It does amount to several $1,000s, especially as we get a little older. The benefits go up based on age as well, and the use of the benefits. So that would eliminate or cut back some of the expense on benefits as well. On council and as far as the town as employees are concerned, benefits are increasing on a yearly basis. Close to 28% of the salaries that are paid, including council and staff, are for benefits. So it plays a big part of the expense area.
So it's a resolution that's moved by Councillor Rick Owen, seconded by Councillor Dennis Perrier, that council consider the remuneration bylaw with the following amendments. The wage freeze for members of council to the 2018 level, and 2, to remove the health benefits for council members from age 55 to 65 who serve 3 terms.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Chief Administrative Officer.
I think it's been one of the most anticipated items coming up on every municipality's agenda, and that is with the legalization of cannabis. Councils across the province are being asked to decide, do they want to opt in or opt out of the process. Opting in allows, obviously, a storefront to be established in your community. Opting out does not change the fact that people can buy cannabis or use cannabis, obviously. It's just the issue with the storefront. The report that was put together, I think, does provide a fairly good summary. What we have asked, based on Councillor Adams' request, that we show a map and where the schools are, try to show what the distance is, or what the required distance away from the property line would look like, as well afterwards with some of the other areas, because this is not what's supposed to happen. Oh. You have not been indulging, have you? Everything went dark. So the map, these are the schools and schools and parks. So that is one of, I think, across the province, one of the major concerns. Where do you put a store? How do you make sure that it maintains the provincially mandated distances? This is what it would look like on the map. And there will always be a range of other issues that council will be asked to attend to. You know, every aspect from enforcement onwards. But right now, I think the question is fairly straightforward: opt in, opt out, decide not to do anything, and then you're in. Now, if you opt in, you get money from the government. 5,000, I think it is up front, and then afterwards a price per, or a dollar amount per household, not to be lower than 5,000. And if you opt out, I think you get one $5,000 payment. I'm not sure that you get the second one. I don't see too many communities opting out, apparently, but it's in the discussion platform now for across most communities. Right. Just leave it at that.
Wilf, if you opt out, there's no way of getting back in. That's my understanding.
One way.
one-way
Yeah,
ticket?
the door only opens out, and that's it.
So you're better off then to,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right. You can't opt out after, yeah, once you make your decision. I'm sorry, I've been struggling with that one too, and I have not been touching it.
you're in, that's it.
Yeah.
Any discussion with council? Counselor Owen?
Yeah, I was talking to our public school board trustee, and she's concerned that the 150 meters from a school isn't far enough, but if I read the information correctly, that's something we don't have control of, we can't change. Having said that, I would much rather opt in than continue to support, and in the hopes that opting in would reduce the black market that's going on. At least by opting in, people that are using it, we know they're getting a quality product without any other garbage in it. As has been pointed out in the reports, that anybody living in Kirkland Lake can order it online, so it's not like the old days with the liquor thing where you voted to be a dry town. So I'm all in favor of opting in.
Counselor Adams?
During the election, this was like my first question, and certainly the first one was economic development and how do we allow it, and then the second one was opting in or opting out. So certainly for having the schools be 150 meters, that's the only pretty much rule that can be placed on it. We had that training session, and they did talk about the cannabis shops, and we can't get detailed as to having it close to parks or anything, because that would be discrimination against that company in a sense. It would have to be a blanket rule. So the 150 meters, the only one would be Central, that would have downtown, some areas of that not being able to have a storefront, but those are the rules that were handed. I like to opt in. It's already available online. It's controlled, it's legal, it's a source of revenue. But something that's out there as well is that there's only going to be 25 stores through a lottery system. So we'll see if Kirkland Lake gets the luck of the draw on that one out of all of Ontario. To further the conversation, I would really like to make sure that we update our bylaws to include cannabis, and even include the enforcement of the 20 meters around parks. At Civic Field, there's some private events that are held, and there's usually a smoking area put right outside the gate, and I have to walk my children through there to get there. So if cannabis is going to be allowed, and I have to walk my children through intoxicants to get into a park, I'd like to make sure that we enforce that and establish a set perimeter of a smoking bylaw around our parks and around our publicly accessible areas. But on the topic of opt-in, opt-out, I would like to opt in.
Do we have a bylaw for no smoking around Civic right now? So we'd have to expand on that. I think that's a reasonable request, Councillor Adams. Councillor Ivanov?
I also agree. I think we should opt in. I think it's a legal, legitimate business in the province of Ontario and in our country, and that we should not ask somebody to not run a business in Kirkland Lake because we feel, because I mean, I'm not a pot smoker. I never will be, and it's nothing to do with me, and I just don't, I don't find it affects me, but you know what, if people want to smoke it and that's what, it's a legal thing to do, then hey, go for it. And hope somebody makes a fortune doing it. And we have a business just outside of town that's growing pot, and there are people live and work in just outside of Kirkland Lake, so.
I would support it based on what Councillor Owen was saying as well. They're going to be able to order it through mail and FedEx and whoever, so it's coming to town whether we like it or not. So I would support it.
the request, or the recommendation from staff was that, council just accept this information and bring it back to the January 15th meeting. Would you rather just vote on it right now and do the opt-in? Or would you like to take some time, talk to your constituents and bring it back on the 16th? It's totally up to you.
Any objection to voting no?
So we do have till the 22nd,
Yes.
so this was a 1-week notice based on... This was a 1-week notice based on our busy schedule for the month of December. So I did inform people who were at my house on Friday that this was on the agenda for Tuesday. So I only gave them three days notice, 4 days. So if we have till the 22nd, I wouldn't mind seeing it on the 16th, just to provide more input from the municipality and the public health unit and so on.
So the motion is moved by Councillor Dennis Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council has accepted the information on retail cannabis locations and directs the Chief Administrative Officer to bring back to the January 15th, 2019 meeting for decision.
All in favor? Unanimous?
Just on the same, there's a number of really good publications and information pieces available from the Ontario government on everything from what you can do, where you can do it, whatever like that. And I would have printed them out, but they're kind of extensive. If anybody's interested in a link to them, just for their own purposes, let me know, and I'll send them on to you.
Thank you. Questions from council to staff requesting amendment to procedural bylaw? Chief Administration Officer?
In 2019, council will be asked to pass a number of amendments to its procedural bylaw. That includes everything from communication staff, council relations, etc. I'm bringing this forward as something that perhaps we could be bringing into effect from January onwards as part of that. Want to be clear that when we receive, as staff, and I think I'm speaking for all staff, when we receive inquiries from council, we welcome them. That's not an issue. The issue is, well, if we have a one-to-one conversation, then the rest of council is not benefiting from that. The rest of staff that may have some input into the matter is not benefiting or able to participate necessarily. As well, the public. You're elected officials, you're asking usually very good questions that challenge us, that are, the questions themselves and the information being transited is of interest to the public. So we're bringing this forward to make a procedural adjustment that we have an opportunity within every council meeting where it's councilors' questions, that if we know what they are, pose them. And we will then have that opportunity to collect the answers, bring the information back, share it with everybody. It's an opportunity for all parties, as I said, to understand both the questions as well as properly prepare themselves and share the answers. I'm suggesting that questions from council also be put in writing so that the public does have the same advance notice as they do with every other item on the agenda. It's not to put a burden on the councilors, but sometimes when you're writing out that question becomes a lot more clear. And it's, at the same time, provides the staff, okay, we know that's coming, let's get some stuff, let's get some information ready for that. I'm not trying to defer any kind of information gathering or anything like that. If there's a quick question, a quick answer, of course we're going to provide it. And we get contacted one-on-one or as a group. If there's a question that we think does require more time and effort, then we're going to let you know. And we'll bring it back to council or, you know, suggest that it does come back. The point is to put the entire exchange of information between council and staff onto the public platform so that it is shared, and that it also then benefits the staff because we need to put that into our daily workflow as well. Any questions that can be answered quickly, great, but some of them don't. And you spend 2 or 3 hours or 2 or 3 days. It's work that's being moved around, and so it's not really fair to the staff. We want to bring that back into alignment. It's very similar to what was pointed out when we had the Saturday training session. Bringing it forward, I think that it will benefit both parties, but is at your discretion. Whatever you direct, so we shall do.
Just a comment, Wilf. I know in the previous council, I can only speak for, that was, I found very frustrating because councilors would come to a council meeting like today, but not have that opportunity to ask any questions. And next thing, you don't see the other councilors for about 2 weeks, and half the time it gets forgotten, or there's no real discussion going on amongst councilors. I like the idea of what you're proposing. I'm not convinced that you need to know the questions in advance. This is my opinion, that they can be off the cuff if it's a subject that's going to require additional research to do on. Obviously, the staff will get back to you at another date. That's my own opinion. I don't think any council member is here to try and throw any staff member under the bus or catch them off guard. I know when we have a regular council meeting to bring up a topic, and I got the hook a few times on this, that normally you can't bring a subject to council for full discussion without it being on the agenda, because obviously the public may be interested in hearing the same topic. But I'm just wondering if this can be revised somewhat. It's food for thought. That's my opinion. I'm looking for the rest of council's input.
If I may just respond to that?
Yeah.
Fine. We're jittery creatures by nature, but that doesn't mean that we can't answer. If the question is posed and we can't answer it, we'll let you know. And no, it'd be great, I guess, in an ideal world to know everything that we're walking into from moment to moment during the day. Most of us don't have that luxury right now. We're used to that, and I'm pretty confident in our staff that if there is a question, they will be able to at least give you some direction on it. So, yeah, I agree with you there.
Okay. Councillor Owens?
There you go. So would this be like a discussion period, or just we ask the question and then the answer comes back to us later, or if you have the answer, you give us the answer? Or do we get to discuss between councillors, or?
From my perspective, if we have the answer, we give you the answer. If that stimulates even more discussion and there is more research required, then fine. But I personally would like to be able to answer anything that comes forward when it's being asked, because by the time we get to 9 o'clock at night, by the next day, people are forgetting and stuff like that. I think it's more appropriate and more efficient.
Owen?
Yeah, over the years, one thing about council meetings that always bothered me was the council would ask a staff member a question and the staff member wouldn't know the answer, and they'd say, well, I'll email you this week. But I'm sitting out there listening. I've heard the question at a public meeting. I don't hear the answer. I don't know if the staff member answered. And that always bothered me. This, I believe, would correct that situation, because if a question was asked at an open meeting during this question period thing, the staff member would be obligated to come to the next council meeting with the answer. And I think that from that sense, it's a step in the right direction. My concern, however, is since I've been elected, I've had a number of individual citizens of Kirkland Lake ask me questions. And they are specific, say, to their address or specific for the most part, and I've been going through Wilf, and Wilf's been getting the answers for me very quickly, and that's great. For the most part, they're quick answers. But in one case, it is a long, drawn-out thing that's going on forever. And when a person asks me, for instance, they want information about a particular place they live because they're pursuing something. And I don't think it's appropriate to bring those kinds of requests. Today I got an inquiry about water. A problem, a person's, I don't think it's appropriate to identify that person, where the house is, and in this case, that may be specific to the problem, okay? So I do have some problems with, you know, I personally, I like what I'm doing now. I like being able to bring to our CAO the questions I receive from residents, because he is the boss of the directors and of the managers. He knows where those questions should be directed. And if he feels it's appropriate, he tells me to talk to them directly. And it's working well. And I'm a little leery of changing that.
That was actually why I was saying about the part about writing the questions, or so that we know what they are ahead of time, so that I don't pretend to know it. I ask the staff, and if you know, if it comes up as a flag with Joanne, then I know very quickly, okay, this one we're going to be dealing with this way. I agree. If you have something that's very with an identifiable individual, don't bring that forward. Do you have, however, an issue from that identifiable individual that could be extrapolated to the rest of the community? So maybe it's a question of, is water pressure in this area going to be fixed, without bringing that forward? That I think we would welcome, because that's something that Donnie would need to know and would be able to give an answer on. One of the other comments that had been made during the presentation on Saturday too was, don't hesitate to go through your the mayor as well and ask, what do you think? Is this appropriate or not? Whichever, because there's guidance there. But if it's something that's not appropriate, I think you'll know. Sorry. But I agree, that was one of the concerns.
I just brought that up because I want to make sure that option remains available no matter how we change our procedural bylaw.
In my mind, it would be, yes. You have a very specific, very definitely.
Yeah, Wilf, to add to that, when individual councillors go directly to the CAO, the rest of councillors don't hear about it, and often it's they've got the same feeling or concerns about different subjects. So I think this process at least opens up the topic, and every councillor then can participate in the discussion or is aware of what an issue might be. And to be honest with you, I haven't heard too many, if any, questions from councillors, and I'm here every morning, and so I'm certainly open to the communication process and do some of the legwork in that case. But I do like the openness of having it at council meeting, and the public can hear as well as what I'm sure they have some of the same concerns that we have, and they've brought them to you. So I do like the process, but I think we have to be careful. You can't start identifying particular people or staff. That wouldn't be right. So there has to be guidelines. I agree. That's my approach. Any other comments, Councillor Perrier?
I agree with you, Pat. I think this is basically just following up on all of our election promises that we keep everything out in the open and letting everybody know what was going on. And by doing this, I think it's showing that we're not hiding anything or and making people aware, and I think the population would appreciate that. So I'm in
Thank you.
favor.
Any further discussion or comments, concerns? So, are we passing that tonight? Yeah,
So it's a resolution that's moved by Councillor Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council approves the amendment to the council meeting procedural bylaw to add a section, questions from council to staff.
yeah, just one more comment. Joanne and I did attend procedural bylaw workshop in Timmins, and there was some good ideas. Also, Joanne sent out an example of what I think it was Bancroft used. It was fairly straightforward. So this, we haven't done up the document yet, so this will give us some time to put it together. But if anybody has any further input or concerns, please let us know. So we'll vote on that now. All in favor? Unanimous? Deputy Treasurer, year-end reserve resolution, Peter Georgioff.
The year-end reserves resolution is made at the end of each year, as it's necessary for council to direct Treasury on the recording of various surpluses as well as any deficits.
It's moved by Councillor Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen, that the following transactions be recorded in accordance with the public sector standards. Number one, that any net revenues from sundry land sales be directed to the reserve for working capitals. And that number two, in the event of a general revenue fund surplus in its entirety, be allocated to the reserve's working capital. Oh my gosh, I can't read tonight. Sorry. The unspent portion of all 2018 capital projects be directed to the Reserve for Infrastructure Capital to ensure the completion of all projects in 2019. That in the event of consolidation deficit, the deficit shall be carried forward to the subsequent year's budget in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Act. And the Reserve Fund, any surplus resulting in Waterworks Fund be directed to the Reserve Fund for Waterworks capital projects, the intention of which is to defray the cost of waterworks. That any surplus resulting in the wastewater fund be directed to the reserve fund for wastewater, the intention of which is to defray the cost of wastewater, and that any proceeds from the sale or long-term lease of land located on Archer Drive be directed in its entirety to the existing reserve fund for Archer Drive.
All in favor? Unanimous? Director of no, I've got resolution to draw down from election reserve. Sorry, Peter.
Oh, no problem. So every year, included in the budget, or typically in the budget, is an amount to set aside in a reserve to take care of the expenses of election year. And so this resolution is to draw down that amount out of the reserve and to help cover the expenses of the 2018 election.
Any questions? Counselor Stacy Waite?
So, sorry, you said to help pay down. Does that mean that we are not allocating enough funds over the previous 4 years that are needed? Is that something that we should be looking at to increase the allotted funds?
Through your worship, we don't have all of the 2018 expenditures at this time. I can say that that we would be, the expenses would be higher than the drawdown from reserves.
Counselor Rowan?
Yes, through your worship to Peter, you sort of answered part of my question. I was going to ask you how much the election costs, but you said you haven't got all. Would it be possible for, and perhaps this should go through Wilf, I'm not sure, to get a report back to council on what the total cost of the elections are once it's been tabulated?
Certainly. I don't see why not. You.
Through your worship, that, you know, that'll be once the 2018 expenses are finalized. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think to date, that account is at about $20,000. Most of the bills have come in. I think there might be one more that is outstanding. It does cost approximately $20,000 to run the election, as we just found out. We do allocate, I believe, $4,000 every budget year into reserves. There are 3 years reserves right now that we're pulling down from this reserve, which is the $12,000. We have not yet put the 2018 allocated amount into that. So there is still a little bit extra. And yes, I think in next year's budget, we will allocate more money, probably about $5,000 per year that we will put into that reserve fund. Or the reserve fund, I'm short, sorry.
That would be
Reserve.
reserve.
Reserve. So we do budget every year for the election and put money away.
Any further comments, questions? Go ahead, Joanne.
So it's moved by Councillor Dennis Perrier, seconded by Councillor Rick Owen. The council directs the deputy treasurer to draw down in full the balance from the election reserve account to put toward the expenses of the 2018 municipal elections.
All in favor? Unanimous? Director of Community Services?
There is a grant available from the Government of Ontario called Green Communities Fund, and Public Health is one of the stakeholders that is approved to apply for this money. So the Timiskaming Health Unit has approached the municipality to see if they will offer a letter of support. What they're looking for is dollars that can be allocated to promote what is considered active school travel. Basically means that they're going to encourage more children in the Kirkland Lake area to walk to and from school. It does have to be on a community scale. The Timiskaming Health Unit has reported that they'd like to work with 4 local schools who have all approved them to work with them if they are successful in this grant. And one of the requirements for them to apply to the province is a letter of support from the municipality stating that the municipality is in favor of encouraging kids to walk to and from school. And this is due tomorrow, so they've asked us to bring this to our attention.
Casey?
Which schools were picked?
She didn't let me know.
So we don't know the process as to, like, if it's a public board or the French Catholic board?
She did not
Okay.
indicate that to me. I can ask her.
Okay.
You know, she just contacted me yesterday and had asked for this, so the information provided was what you have, so.
Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I've seen some background on a similar program in North Bay and it seemed to be quite effective. In that program, they had parents so supervising the kids when they walked back and forth. And so as a person, I think that's great. But as a counselor, I'm sitting here going, we don't know which schools, so we don't know what streets they're walking on. We don't know if there's streets where we do snow removal on the sidewalks. If we send a letter of support, are we in any way becoming liable should something happen to one of the children? And finally, is it actually safer for them to walk with all the snowbanks and the cars backing out of driveways, or take a bus, or be driven to school? And so, in principle, I support this, but without having answers in terms of, you know, I mean, we may be opening ourselves up to being pressured to do more snow removal of sidewalks when we can't afford it. I mean, in an ideal world, we would do all the sidewalks. So I have some concerns in my position as a counselor about this program.
Councillor Owen, are you referring to the residential sidewalks or the public access routes to the school? Because, I mean, it would be up to the citizens to clean their sidewalks, which we know are not happening.
Well, it would be if we had a bylaw forcing them to do it, but we don't have a bylaw, which I think is a reasonable position to take, considering the amount of snow we have. But no, I'm referring to the sidewalks that go in front of people's houses, and I'm concerned that if this program goes into place and it's successful, that in turn that we will get pressured into spending more money that we don't really have at this time, or in the as far as I can tell, in the near future, on removal of snow from sidewalks. And then a big one for me is the safety. When you've got kids walking past driveways with people backing out, when they could have taken a bus or could have been given a ride, I think the safety has to be looked at.
Any comments, Bonnie?
I know very little about this. I know as much as what you know. I believe that without a letter of support from the municipality, they are ineligible to apply, so I think that could be problematic for the Timiskaming Health Unit.
We'd like to ask Ashley to join us. Sorry,
Oh,
she's
good.
been dealing with some of the
I actually had an hour meeting today with the health unit, and this came up. So I actually have a little bit of additional information for you, just to help you out. So this program here, it's actually our local Timiskaming Health Unit that's putting it on. And you are right. What they're going to do is do sidewalk analysis, looking at the different routes that we currently maintain, whether there's any gaps in that route in order to get people from one side of the town to the other, in order to promote active transportation. So you're 100% right. It could result in us being pressured to maintain these sidewalks we're not really maintaining right now. The issue is that you have two plans. You have an age-friendly community improvement plan and an official plan that both tell you that you're supposed to encourage active transportation and be that level of support for these individuals to provide funding to be able to look at this stuff. So just my 2 cents.
Councillor Owen?
Well, in terms of encouraging children to be active, I think the parents have a responsibility there, and not necessarily town council or a health unit. I think that's the responsibility of a parent, and you know, that's where the emphasis should be placed, and keep us right out of the question. Thank you.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne, but the support letter doesn't legally commit us to anything. It's other than saying we support the issue, and that's what they're looking for. Is that a fair? Yeah. I mean, Rick, we did go through that discussion where I told you I walked to school barefoot. No
Yeah,
return.
yeah. Your worship,
Both ways, noon hour too.
your worship,
Yeah.
in terms of that, Ashley's already she's in agreement that we could be putting ourselves in a position to be pressured to spend more money. And I don't think as a council, we're in a position to be looking at programs that are gonna, could potentially end up adding to our costs. We're having enough just to keep our current programs going.
We're not committing ourselves to anything here. We're just supporting they put the program in place. We can opt in or opt out if there's more concern later. I think it's something we have to look at further to address those concerns. Councillor Ivanov.
There's also 4 months a year where there is no snow on the sidewalks, and, you know, I mean, you would hope that people that are taking the bus aren't gonna say, I'm gonna walk to school every day of the year, you know, but to promote an active lifestyle, for children, I think they spend way too much time on their iPads and computers and gaming, and, you know, there are times when, and I'm sure, you know, the health unit is not looking at having kids out there trying to get themselves killed or taking any risk. I would hope that there's some common sense between parents, children, and the health unit as to how this active living program is actually implemented.
Thank you. I would support sending the letter of support. That doesn't mean we're opting in at this point. That's my opinion. Joanne, any further Councillor Adams?
Yep, so we are going to provide support, so even in what's been provided to us, it says provide funding of $20,000 to $60,000 in tools and resources to support school AT programs that focus on kindergarten. So what would that money be directed to? Would we get a share of that for sidewalk maintenance then? That's a good question to go back.
Through you, your worship, this funding is actually to hire a individual that will dedicate themselves to active transportation for this project for 16-month duration. So, you know, you're not going to see any money come back to the municipality.
I guess that it's not entirely clear. Are they expecting every sidewalk in Kirkland Lake to be cleaned? No. I wouldn't. Not gonna happen.
It'll be similar to what we did with the age-friendly community improvement plan, where we created an action strategy or an action plan on things that we could tackle in order to further enhance our age-friendly initiatives. The same thing that they'll likely create is, here's what you can do, here's what we can do as recommendations to the municipality from a sidewalk maintenance perspective in the winter. Here's where we saw, you know, bumps in the road that perhaps there could be some maintenance happening or some sidewalk replacement in order to increase active transportation for youth. We have previously done a sidewalk walkthrough already with Ms. Judy Thompson. So that's already involved in our capital projects from last year and was supposed to be a year 2 for next year. So that's something that I'm going to be sending to them because it might be a duplicate of work for them to go in and look at that. The issue is ours was more focused on downtown versus the schools themselves. But, I mean, it's going to be a list of items that they are probably going to recommend to the municipality be done. And it's not just us, it'll be other areas as well, organizations that can focus on it in order to encourage them to walk to school and do it safely.
I think it's important to know too, they're not out there to be the sidewalk cops and just nail us. They're out there to get the kids moving.
Yes.
You're paying your taxes. Your taxes are going to support this program in some Ontario community. Is it something that would benefit your children? Just asking. I know that mine, when they looked for a ride, they got one, but it was basically with me chasing them down the street, because I feel the same way, that they need to get out there more. Is there a way we could encourage the kids to get out more and contribute to our planning as a community? Just putting it there.
The deadline to apply is December 21st, so that's creeping up very quickly.
I think they actually need to have an answer right by tomorrow, so they can put their application together.
Go ahead.
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Patrick Adams, The council approves a letter of support for the Ontario Active School Travel Fund, Round 2, a program seeking to increase physical activity opportunities for Ontario students by supporting and expanding active school travel programs for elementary school children.
All in favor? Opposed? 6-4, 1 opposed. Ashley, you're back up. And Dixit, sorry.
For your lordship, I'm doing a report to apply for the funding through the Federation of Canadian Municipality through Green Infrastructure Fund to support the Swastika project we had going right now. And it is recommended that council pass the resolution to directing the staff to proceed with the initial review fund application with the FCM to the decommissioning of the Swastika sewage treatment plant and the construction of the new sanitary force main to the Kirkland Lake wastewater treatment plant. Basically, this funding programs cover up to 80% cost of the total project cost, and our cost for the Swastika project total is $9,078,420. The funds already secure under the small community infrastructure funding is about 66%, which is $5,450,266, and the remaining cost, which is 33%, which is the town portion, half of it is already secure under the Ontario formula-based funding, and remaining is still from the capital budget. This is over and beyond whichever is the project's already been proceed, and it is already covered with the financial perspective, but this is an opportunity to cover that cost. So if you apply through that funding, that the initial cost, which is towns has to suffer, which is going to be funded through under this application. So
Has there actually been an RFP sent out to pin down the exact costs?
So basically, we had these projects right now in the second final state design right now. Under the engineering and design firm, we already passed the geotech survey and reporting. So basically, our plan is to go this project RFP for the construction early next summer. That's the project status right now. And this project costs already been put down, and upon reviewing all the project costs up to the date, we are we are on the budget right now, looking at the factors with including the detailed designs and part.
Any comments from councillors? It really is a good news story, getting 100% financing, because that's not always the case. Usually, if we're fortunate enough to get 90% from the province, in this case, we're getting 100%. So it's going to open up more opportunities for property owners in towards Swastika and that area. So I would support moving ahead. Resolution?
It's moved by Councillor Casey Owens, seconded by Councillor Patrick Adams. The council directs staff to proceed with initial review application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund for the decommissioning of the Swastika sewage treatment plant and construction of new sanitary force main to the Kirkland Lake wastewater treatment plant.
All in favor? Unanimous?
So I just want to bring it up again, just so that we're very clear, that if we are successful in getting this 3.6 million from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, that will actually relieve us from the 3.6 we were going to be getting from OSIF formula and be able to dedicate that money towards other projects. So it'd be a very, very, very good story if we were able to achieve that funding.
Winter maintenance plan approval?
Yeah. All right. So we presented the proposed winter maintenance manual at the last meeting. And in terms of public feedback received, there was quite a bit of great feedback that was brought to our attention. Requirement for better bylaw enforcement, snow being pushed on municipal properties, operational challenges and stricter rules and regulations when it comes to health and safety, removal of snow on the sidewalks underneath the bridge in Swastika, patrons getting ticketed between midnight and 7 a.m. I won't go through all of them, but there's quite a few there. In terms of responses to some of these concerns, the town is currently without a bylaw enforcement officer, and the OPP have been working diligently with us to tackle some of these enforcement issues, including those dealing with community standards, parking, winter parking, snow placement, and mediation of neighbor-to-neighbor disputes. I do expect that we will have better enforcement in place in regards to parking or winter parking and snow bylaw once the bylaw enforcement officer is hired. So that should resolve some of the bylaw enforcement issues that were raised at the last meeting. Winter parking regulations, as Mr. Kiley had mentioned, that he will be bringing that to the Police Service Board to introduce some leniency when ticketing. So hopefully we'll see some resolution with that in the upcoming council meetings. The big one that we did want to bring up, staff is going to review cost comparisons for different types of ways and methods in order to conduct winter maintenance activities. So it was brought up that we could look at doing shift work. So we do want to let council know that we are going to try and review this over the next few months to try and come up with some alternatives or shift work as an option going into next year. Also, the hired equipment versus overtime calculation that was previously promised by former administration. I do want to take a look at that and take a look at that 2016 year where that was done and do some cost analysis and whether or not that was actually a benefit to us or not. We'll also try and take a look at some other options that we could bring forward to you from other municipalities. My goal here is let's try to implement the winter maintenance plan the way it is currently right now set up, and then use those numbers that we've calculated from November to May to analyze and be our base measure for these other options that could be coming into play. So a report on that will follow likely in, I'm hoping, April, May. Outstanding items for council to consider. There was the conversation of adding winter maintenance of the sidewalk from Allen Avenue to Dunfield Road on 2nd Street. Staff have reviewed opening the sidewalk up for maintenance, so we did a site visit and took a look at it. Typically, winter sidewalk maintenance is justified by reviewing the amount of pedestrian traffic and whether the sidewalk is located near schools or businesses. In this area in particular, the trees would have to be trimmed in order to get the trackless through that area. There's likely to be damage to the grass boulevard each spring, just the way it's set up. And then adjacent property owners may have concerns as we'd be significantly reducing the area where they can pile snow and park their vehicles. So they actually elongate their driveways in the winter to be able to keep track of this or have the snow piled appropriately. So they're encroaching a little bit into the municipal road allowance. So if we cut back to where the sidewalk is, they'd lose that driveway access, that depth in the driveway access. So staff, because of these issues, we are not recommending that we move forward with adding the section of sidewalk at this time. But if council does want to entertain it, I think it'd probably be best to communicate directly with the residents that live on the street and perhaps have a little meeting with them to see whether that's something they'd like to entertain, as this is not a recommendation that came forward from those residents in particular. The second one that I'd like to just address is the increased maintenance under the bridge in Swastika. We took a look at it, and as we'd mentioned previously, it's extremely challenging to try and be on top of this area since the MTO standards are different than our municipal standards. So the plow for the MTO will actually go by 3-4 times a day, whereas we're only out there doing the sidewalk once a day when it snows. So we've contacted the provincial representative to have the plow slow down when he goes by. It sort of reduces the amount of snow that's pushed on the sidewalk. So if they could be a little bit more careful when they're going through that area, it would help significantly. We're also going to be keeping an eye on this area, and we're hoping that through better communication with the province, we'll see better maintenance. And we'll leave it at that for now. And if it does become an ongoing issue, we'll try to bring it back to council and get some opinions on how we want to proceed. So other than that, the only thing that really changed in the winter maintenance plan that was presented to you at the last meeting in this one was the sidewalk schedule. And the only reason it was done was we actually noticed an internal error on our side. It identified that a large portion of Hayes Street was being maintained on a sidewalk perspective, when essentially it's only underneath the bridge that gets maintained. So we just made sure that we've corrected that drawing. Are there questions?
Councillor Adams?
Through your worship to Ashley, thank you for looking into the height requirements in snowbanks. I brought that up first, and then even somebody brought that up that same night, a resident in front of the post office. So you had looked at all the other municipalities. You did find some, but certainly some of them were in southern Ontario where they don't get as much snow. You did follow up on the looking at New Liskeard for their shift schedule. And I think a highlight that I certainly saw was that because of their shift work schedule, is that they are able to remove their snowbanks after a snowstorm in the downtown core. So they don't have to wait till a certain point. They just have guys on a schedule who are going to be maintaining it. Some of the comments that we've heard in the past as well, and through seeing as well, especially on streets like Queen Street, how tightly packed those streets can get with people on a routine schedule. We can probably see a reduction in some of those snowbanks being able to get that tight on the road. So certainly thank you. This report that was handed back to us though yesterday for the winter maintenance plan, there were some other amendments in some other areas that I had noted, especially in some of the wording in snow pole lifting and hauling. If I can just ask going forward, when these procedures and resolutions are provided to us, that there's a list of amendments that are made. That's what happens in the private industry. What I'm familiar with is when we do change policies and procedures that are being discussed, we provide a list of all the amendments that are being made to the words, because words do mean everything in policies and procedures. But besides that, thank you very much.
The other suggestion, if you don't want to do a separate list, is to highlight those particular items that have changed.
If I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's an excellent idea because we're going to be measuring how the winter maintenance plan actually got rolled out at when we get to April, May. And for that reason, I think that it's also important that the roads foreman keep his logs and present his logs as to when the snow was in, levels of snow, when they went out, as part of that presentation in May. And then from that, if there's changes, well, we know why, we've tracked them, and we can see how they fit into the subsequent one for 2019. I think that in terms of keeping it as a living and a working document to guide us forward, it's a good idea.
Agree. Any other comments from councillors? Overall, Don and Ashley, comments that I've received from residents in town, nothing but good. Last year, I'll call it as I saw it. It was brutal. And I think you've taken the right steps, putting this plan together, brought in the right people to put the plan together, and your staff are to be commended for it. The only question I had, and I think I brought up, I'm not sure if you covered this, excuse me if you did, was about the snow removal equipment around the schools during the 8 o'clock or 4 in the afternoon or 3:30 when the children get out. There was one that was the only, wasn't a negative comment, it was just was asking for some consideration timing wise to do it when the children are not around, because it's just much safer. So I know I brought it to your attention. I know you're working on that. So, but otherwise, great job. And please pass that on to the employees, because they get the brunt of the criticism when it's not going right.
Thank you, Worship. We most definitely will pass it on. We've had a lot of challenges over the past few years, and Yeah, the crews are working very, very hard on keeping up to the road maintenance. Thank you.
That's coming back as the bylaw. Introduction and reading and consideration of bylaws, then go ahead.
It's moved by Counselor Casey Owens, seconded by Counselor Patrick Adams, that bylaw 18-146, being a bylaw to name members to various committees of council, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Oh, go comments? Go ahead. Counselor Adams?
Yes, thank you. I had spoke with an individual about why they hadn't put their names forward to the Recreation Committee, and it was mentioned that wasn't part of the original public posting as to requests. So if we vote for this now, is this set, or are we going to provide another opportunity?
This is one of the bylaws that can always come back and be amended
Okay.
as things go forward. So all of our committees are not full, and so we can always add to them
Okay,
as
thank
time
you.
goes by.
Thank you pointing it out, because I have another instance of a request after the fact. Counselor White?
Never gets old. I just wanted to note, we are looking at designing the website. That's upcoming, and we are working on it. So just a note, going forward on that platform and our website, I would really like to see a categorization of which boards and committees are legislated and which are specific to our municipality, as well as separate association memberships from actual boards and committees, with a description of what each of those committees, boards, and association do, their mandates and policies, just for accountability and transparency and local interest, just to make sure that the public are more aware of what these committees, et cetera, do. So that's just a note going forward.
You bring up a good point. Personally, I haven't seen, I should say, a mandate for individual committees, and I don't know if it's ever been done. I did present one for the Northern College, but that's, maybe Wolf, you can expand on that. Is there such an animal?
I've seen it referenced in the older councilor briefing manuals, and I would say that some of those references were pretty lengthy. They weren't a very clear mandate statement. They were kind of all over the map. It'd be something that I think would be very helpful in recruiting people, if you could tell them exactly what it is they do, as well as when they meet and what they decide. So I think it's a good idea.
To your point, all the councillors are appointed to different committees, and I would bring that to the chair's attention, and I can give you an example of the one we did for the Northern College, and perhaps each committee could put one together. Okay.
It's moved by Counselor Casey Owens, seconded by Counselor Patrick Adams, that bylaw 18-146, being a bylaw to name members to various committees of council, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Unanimous?
It's moved by Counselor Patrick Adams, seconded by Counselor Casey Owens, that bylaw 18-147, being a bylaw to set the 2019 Town of Kirkland Lake user fees, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
Any comments, discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Whoop. Oh, sorry. 6-1.
It's moved by Counselor Patrick Adams, seconded by Counselor Casey Owens, that bylaw 18-148, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 18-092, a bylaw to set the 2018 budget, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed. And if I may, this is just, this is a one that we do at the end of the year that incorporates all of the resolutions throughout the year that have amended the budget. So this now puts it into a bylaw form that the auditors need in order to carry out their duties.
Okay, all in favor? Unanimous?
It's moved by Counselor Casey Owens, seconded by Counselor Patrick Adams, that bylaw 18-149, being a bylaw to set the remuneration for mayor and members of council, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed. And this bylaw will take into account the resolutions that you have passed earlier in the meeting.
All in favor? Unanimous?
It's moved by Counselor Casey Owens, seconded by Counselor Stacy White, that bylaw 18-150, being a bylaw to adopt the winter maintenance manual, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Unanimous?
It's moved by Counselor Patrick Adams, seconded by Counselor Casey Owens, that bylaw 18-151, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 18-107, NOHFC application for conference and special events intern, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
Go ahead.
Sorry, probably Will. Could you just give us some direction on this, just refresh our memories? It's been a while since the original was passed.
That's right. In 2017, I think I put an application together for an internship, and the intention at that point was to have somebody that could work with the AFMO, and that was a Francophone conference that was held here in September, as well as with the 100th anniversary. We advertised, I think for about 3 weeks, didn't get any applicants. I think that by focusing it a little bit more just towards the 100th anniversary, and the fact that there's some people that have finished school now, not many, but there are some, we should have a better chance of getting somebody in.
No further discussion? Bylaw?
Yeah.
Oh, all in favor? Unanimous. Any notice of motions for the next meeting? Counselor Adams?
So for this point, just because I'm new, sorry, this would be if we have a consideration of a bylaw that we would like to have pass? Like, we would motion that now?
Yes, if
Okay.
there's anything you'd like to bring forward.
Yep. I'd like to move to have a bylaw that would change our procurement policy to never allow a capital project to be funded that does not have the soft costs included in a Class D estimate.
Okay, noted.
Yeah, so can you just write that out and email that to me, and so I'll put it into a motion for next?
Absolutely.
If I remember correctly, he will require a seconder at the meeting? Okay. Confirmation bylaw?
It's moved by Patrick Adams and seconded by Counselor Casey Owens. The bylaw 18-152, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held December 18th, 2018, be read a first, second, and third time, enacted and passed.
All in favor? Unanimous? Councilors' reports? Counselor Adams?
Yep, in light of our new amendment to our procedural bylaw for questions from council to staff, in terms of transparency, I have prepared a few questions that I have made in the past, so just that the public can know what I've been working on. So as of last week, our town's safety and training coordinator stated in a public meeting that he had witnessed a very serious near miss as a result of somebody ignoring our town flagging crew. The near miss report identified that this is a common problem. I requested if any other similar incident had been recorded, as well as requested how many near miss reports were made in 2018, as well as first aids. It is important to make sure that we have a strong safety program to ensure that near miss reporting is encouraged. It would be unfortunate if a collision with one of our staff were to happen, and in the investigation it turned out that this was a common problem that was never identified. Does our health and safety policy encourage near miss reporting as well as follow up on investigations? Second concern, public and staff safety as well. On December 12th, the former dance studio was torn down, and overnight, a wooden sawhorse barricade was erected around the site. This barricade did not prevent public access to the site and had a high risk potential for anybody to scavenge through the site or accidentally fall into the debris. The questions I had asked were, do our permits for demolition require a standard for barricades to be erected? Was the type of barricade specified? What does our procedure state for barricading the site for preventing access to the public? I would like to make sure that public safety and liability to the taxpayers is protected. I had one more question that I had outstanding still. This is Public Safety and Fire Prevention and Protection Act. It was requested that information be provided as to how many fines were given by our fire department in 2017 and 2018 for enforcement. The Fire Master Plan identified that public education and enforcement is required. A policy could be established that sets out that our fire department is to complete X amount of inspections of private dwellings every quarter. In 2016, our fire department had 55 false alarm and equipment malfunction calls. Other municipalities charge the private dwellings a fee if the fire department returns to the same place more than 2 times. I think this is something that could be followed up on.
If you would, Rob is here. If you can probably speak to part of that. Before he comes up, as to the near misses, there's a couple of things. We've reached out to the OPP to determine if we have cameras on site, will they follow it up? And they said they would. Now the issue is, how do we get the cameras on site? Something you have to digitally or manipulate with your hands is difficult with the gloves and that. We're looking at both body cam, but also seeing if our health and safety supervisor could be on site with a dash mount or something else. We want to test it out and see if we can get that, and then we can actually follow up. The corollary to that would be obviously a public education program as well. We're not here to try to ding the public, but we do have to protect our workers. It's getting a little bit beyond this, the pale here. When they had the road blocked off, there were a couple of people that decided that you could still drive around the barricades and go and find a parking lot. That kind of stuff, there's no excuse for it. That's stupid. Okay, and that deserves a response. But definitely we want to educate people and make it clear to them that the people that they are ignoring are their friends and family, and the people that they're going to probably hit are their friends and family. So we are taking that one seriously. On the public safety at the demolition, I've asked the health and safety coordinator to put together a standard, I guess a template. What are the codes that are followed, and what's the process that's followed for the most common activities that the corporation undertakes, so that we can ensure that it is all covered off, but also that when we are asked a question, we can present it without having make you wait for whatever period of time while we collect everything. The fire prevention, Rob, if you would like to come up, please. I don't think you can answer number of fines, but you can talk to your process right now as to how you do it.
The first false alarm is free, and then it starts to cost money after that. Yes. Yeah.
Want to share any ideas about number of calls? Or you really don't like to speak, do you?
What's the question?
It's mainly in reference to our fire master plan that did identify that there was a current situation is likely reality for the foreseeable future, so greater value should be provided to the public by effectively utilizing firefighters for the purpose of fire avoidance, thus reducing overall municipal costs to some extent. As they did identify in the 2016 study that there wasn't enough enforcement being done. So how many enforcements were made in the last 2 years?
That I'd have to look into. I'm not 100%
Yep.
sure.
And would it be possible, do you think, if we were to set up like a quarterly quota for inspections on private dwellings to help reduce the fire risk to the public as requested in the fire master plan?
Sure, that would be possible.
Absolutely.
You're off the hook. Oh, sorry, maybe you're not. Councillor Owen?
Yeah, I just want to comment on one thing. It would be over the 2-year period, but I became aware of a building that wasn't meeting the fire code. And I just happened to mention it to a firefighter. Actually, I was asking him where I would look in the fire code to find out the requirements. And within a day, that building was inspected. Within less than 3 months, the owner of that building was ordered to bring it up to code. So my experience is that if you have a concern and you make it known to the Kirkland Lake Fire Department, they will act on it. Now what happens sometimes, this happened to involve a large corporation, and of course they fought it tooth and nail every way, and they did get some concessions. But in the end, they did meet the fire requirements. So I just want to point out the fire department does act on complaints, and they act very quickly, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Rick. To Councillor Adams' point about setting quotas, quarterly quotas, it does make a lot of sense. Usually when you set a quota, there's an expectation that they're going to be done. So I think that's would be a move in the right direction. And just one comment about the building over here that was torn down. Do we actually issue a demolition permit to ourselves? We do. Okay. My only comment, I think we're moving in the right direction now that's been highlighted about access to the building. We had barricades which don't do a heck of a lot. Fencing would have been a lot more appropriate to ensure that children couldn't get past there. The overhang from the burnt out section it did create some dangers that I think we can avoid in the future. So I'm happy to hear that we are looking at more of a policy and procedure as to how to handle these situations.
I do want to be clear, that was, well, every building like that is exceptional, but that one was exceptional because it took until I think 2 days before the demolition, before we could finally clear all the legal hurdles. And at that point, we wanted it down as quickly as possible too, because we were anticipating snow and getting it out of the way before people start driving at Christmas time. But I think that part of the discussion then too is, okay, what do we have for barricades? Instead of doing a wooden barricade and a snow fence, is there anything instead that we should be spending our money on or going towards that's more efficient, and that's still something that our guys can set up and take down quickly and make sure it's secure too? You don't want the fences following. On the quotas, may I suggest that you review this perhaps every year or every 2 years, because maybe I'm not right, but I don't want to create an environment where the fire department feels that they have to go out and meet their quota, and then they begin stepping over the line. I think it's good to bring it back to council, see how things have progressed, what kind of activities did you go in, and what did you do, and provide some direction at that point. Not that we've become Big Brother in the wrong way. This is it. That's right. just being careful on it.
You can call it a Councillor Adams.
Certainly, quota was a wrong term, but goals and achievements. But when we do have and spend money on consulting reports, and they highlight very specific areas. So when they came here, specifically the fire marshal indicated that the municipality was unable to furnish statistical or other documentation to demonstrate the delivery of education or inspection programs as required by Part 2 of the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. So this is just a proactive approach to make sure that we are following our guidelines, as council role is to ensure that administrative policies, practices, and procedures and controllership policies, practices, and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council.
Thank you. Just one comment, and it's more to the public. I think town employees, the fire department and council, receive a lot of criticism for not acting on buildings such as this. There was another one was on McKelvey and Queen Street, and it took considerable time to do the cleanup and the demolition. Every situation is different. If there isn't any fire insurance, if there is fire insurance, the fire insurance will have the cleanup probably done within a week or two. When there's no insurance and the property's been abandoned, we have to go through the legal process, as Wolf said. And sometimes that doesn't happen overnight, because if the owner doesn't want to cooperate, and we can't force them to do the cleanup, and it sounds very simple, charge them. Well, if they're not paying their taxes, they sure to heck are not going to be paying for a cleanup. And that's what's happened in a number of cases. So I think it's a little bit of unfair criticism on social media that we should have acted on these a long time ago. We have to follow the legal guidelines, and that's what we're doing. Sometimes it takes a little longer than we like, but so be it. We'll go to adjournment. Oh, I'm sorry.
So December 6th was the National Day of Remembrance. In Mayor Pat Kiley's absence, I had the opportunity to speak at KLDCS, and the principal, the staff, and the students were very pleased with the town for officially recognizing this day. So I'd like to pass on the thank you to staff and fellow council members. The second thing is this month the Texantennial Library Board passed a resolution to increase the number of members from 9 to 11. So there is one open space. So if anybody out there is interested in joining the library board, please contact Joanne. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other councillor reports? Sorry about that, Stacey. Adjournment.
It's moved by Councillor Patrick Adams, seconded by Councillor Casey Owens. The council adjourns its regular meeting of December 18th, 2018.
All in favor? Unanimous. While you're still here, there's no council meetings till after Christmas, so Merry Christmas to everybody. Thanks, Joanne.